This isn't just two guys. It's Jim Link and it's Andy Colburn.
These are the two guys that framed Steven Avery. These are the two guys that killed that woman. These are the two guys, especially him, Lieutenant Jim Link. Everyone's scared of him. On court, he pretends to have a cool and calm demeanor and acts all professional. But he lied under oath twice. He planted the key in Steven Avery's trailer. It's a small trailer. They entered the trailer many, many times and never found the key. And immediately after they found the key, also the blood was planted on the car and on the key because they had possession of Steven Avery's blood. They had possession in the evidence files. And the blood was tampered with. The blood had a little hole in the top, and the seal was broken of the box that kept the blood. They opened the blood and took a little sample of it and planted it in the car. Why would there be blood in the car? If they suggest that she was killed in the trailer, why was her blood in the car? If they suggest that she was killed in the trailer and burned right next to the trailer, these two guys murdered her. When she left this house, they pulled her over and they murdered her. They burned her somewhere else. They cut her up in pieces and they burned her somewhere else. And then they brought the pieces a few days later and threw it where he puts a bonfire. They knew Steven Avery does a bonfire, and they threw her ashes and her bone particles there. That's why there wasn't much found. There was no blood found in the house. Accordingly to them, she was mutilated. According to them, she was shot 11 times. There was no blood anywhere. Steven Avery was days away from receiving $16 million. $16 million from this poor, small town. From this very poor, small town's police department. Their insurance was not going to pay for it, for police misconduct. So instead, they took actions into their own hands. They knew they were going to get in trouble. They knew they were going to lose their jobs. They knew they were going to lose their lives and families. So they killed her and framed Steven Avery. Ever since he got out of jail, they had surveillance on him 24 hours a day. And when they finally saw an opportunity, when they finally saw the photographer, the 25-year-old photographer, show up and take some pictures, they followed her out. And a few miles away, they pulled her over. They abducted her and they murdered her. Immediately took her in the middle of the woods and burned her. And then they started planting evidence little by little, month by month. That's why there were so many inconsistencies. That's why there were so many lies and problems in the trial. There, the police department, the Malitowoc police department, which belongs to them, was not supposed to investigate this. They turned it over to a different jurisdiction. They turned it over to a different police department. Why? Because this same two guys, this same police department, Malitowoc Police Department, had framed him in the past. Steven Avery spent 18 years in prison as an innocent man. He was completely innocent and they knew it. They absolutely knew it. Another police from a different police department called them and told them that they had the wrong guy in jail. Told them that their suspect that's in jail confessed for the crime Steven Avery was convicted of doing in 1985. And they didn't care. They didn't help Steven Avery get out. They covered their tracks. Steven Avery spent 18 years in prison as an innocent man. And as soon as he got out, he was going to sue them. He was already winning the settlement. He already won the settlement. He was gonna get paid in a few days. And what do you know? What's the biggest coincidence? Right before he was gonna get paid, a few days before, they arrest him for murder, which again he did not commit, which again he's innocent for. So Steven Avery already spent 18 years of his life in prison, came out, and almost immediately after was arrested again for a murder he did not commit. He is not a murderer. He never killed or hurt anybody. His police record has breaking into a car and stealing something minor, petty theft worth nothing. He stole a 6-pack of beer once and some chips. Does that sound like a violent, evil man? God knows what these guys have done, covered up. They already sent one guy to jail once. Never were fined for it. Never faced any charges for it. Never lost their jobs over it. So you tell me you mess up at work. Don't you get reprimanded? Don't you get suspended? Don't you lose your job? Well, these two messed up at work. They sent an innocent man 18 years to prison. I don't care if you believe that Steven Avery is guilty of murdering a 25-year-old and burning her corpse. The fact is that he was not innocent for the first trial, and these two murderers sent him away for 18 years, took 18 years from his life away in prison, never apologized. Never apologized. Their excuse was, they used the evidence and that the witness picked them out, but they had no evidence. They had no DNA. In fact, the DNA was what cleared him. It pointed to the other guy, to Mr. Allen, I believe his name was, which had committed a similar crime and was arrested at the same area and the same beach 2 years before. They knew it was him. A different police officer called him and told him it was him. People from their own police department told him it was Allen, that Steven Avery was innocent, that it didn't fit. They planted evidence in the first case. They drew a fake sketch. They coerced the witness. And they sent Steven Avery 18 years to the prison. Mr. Kratz was the prosecutor too. He's just as guilty. And the judge too. The judge collaborated too. Because they could have picked jurors from a different county. They could have had the trial in a different county. They could have dismissed false evidence. They could have gotten him in trouble for lying under oath. More than once, he was caught and admitted to lying under oath. He said, it was a mistake. He lied under oath. Andy Colborn. Look at him. Looks like a killer. Look at him. He looks evil. He's so happy to send an innocent man to jail just because he doesn't like him. And Jim Lenk, Lenk, planted evidence, planted the key in his trailer, planted the blood in the RAV4, didn't sign the login sheet. Neither of these two were even supposed to be on the property. Neither of these two were supposed to be investigating this homicide. But why were they there? To cover their own tracks, to plant evidence, and to send an innocent man to jail. They were there overlooking everything, coercing everything, fixing everything. This trial should be redone. There should be an acquittal. The defense attorney for Steven Avery did an amazing job. Initially, 7 of the jurors were leaning to innocent, were pointing to innocent, but they were soft people from a soft-spoken, very timid town, from a little town full of farm workers. So there was 2 or 3 arrogant, stubborn people in the jurors that had seen the news, and that had believed all the lies. And they were so hard to work with that the 7 jurors that believed Steven Avery was innocent didn't want to fight. They didn't want this to go on. They just wanted to get it over with. And they knew that these stubborn people weren't going to change their mind. And they didn't want to have to come back to court and be jurors again. So they all just changed their mind and said guilty and sent an innocent man to jail. These people owe him $16 million. They never paid him. The city, the state gave him only $400,000 for 18 years in prison. You can make more in McDonald's in 4 years. These people sent him, in 8 years, $400,000 for 18 years in prison. When the settlement was supposed to give him as much as 16 million. But what did they do? They arrested him. And they framed him. And they killed an innocent 25-year-old photographer. They probably raped her too. And what's the worst thing? These people are still Malitowoc County police officers, lieutenants in Wisconsin. Be careful with these guys. Steer very far away. Another thing that corroborates this is when they found out Steven Avery was going to be released from prison, it took months to release him. After 18 years, they took a year or two to release him. But when they found out, they arrested Steven Avery's fiancée 3 times in a matter of 6 months. She served 7 months for a DUI. How did she get caught? Because these guys were following her every move. These guys had surveillance on her 24 hours. It's a small little town in the middle of nowhere. Who gets 7 months for a DUI? Who gets arrested 3 times for petty crap in the middle of nowhere? When she had no accident, when she had no violence, when she had no fights or altercations, when she never robbed anything or hurt anyone. They were following her. Another thing that proves all this. Once he was arrested, once Steven Avery was still in jail, being ready to release, they put a clause that she couldn't see him. They made it illegal, a parole violation. They got to her parole officer. She was not allowed to see him or talk to him. She had a no contact clause. Why? What did that have to do with his case? What did that have to do with her DUI? Why can't she talk to her fiancé? One time, they crossed paths in the road, and she saw him. He was going the other direction in the car, and she was going because she was heading to court. And she smiled. You know what they did? They arrested her again for violation of parole. She smiled at her fiancé and was arrested for violation of parole. Does that make any sense? Isn't that abuse of the law? Abuse of power? Why can't she see her own fiancé? He was wrongfully arrested for murder and being released after serving 18 years for a crime he did not commit, that they proved with forensic evidence and other testimonials that he did not commit. And she was only arrested for DUI. Why wasn't she allowed to see or talk to her fiancé? Because of these guys. Because of Malitowoc County Police Department. Because that Wisconsin Police Department. They had too much control. They had everything in their power. A woman wasn't even allowed to see her fiancé. It made no sense. It's disgusting. And it's not like she called him. It's not like she went to visit him. They were in the same road, heading different directions. And she saw him and she smiled. You're not guilty for just keeping your eyes on the road. You're not guilty for what your eyes see. It's not your fault because you saw something in public, in broad daylight, in the middle of the street. But what did they do? They arrested her for violation of parole. She couldn't take it anymore. She knew that they were after then she knew that they were after her because of him.